It was a strange times in 2020, 2021, wasn't it? Strange times, very strange times. And there's one thing that everyone agreed on. Was that possible? There is. There is one thing that everyone agreed on, whether you went medical, whether you went natural, whether you went with the jab, whether you did not go with the jab. There is one thing everyone agreed on, that we need to boost the immune system. Yeah? Now, if someone said to you, can you please explain to me what your immune system is, could you? They throw around this word, immune system, and it always intrigues me. Well, what is the immune system? So we look at the body, what an incredible body we live in, and our first line of defense is actually our skin. Our skin acts as a protection, holds us together, it breathes. So be careful what you put on it. It absorbs, so be doubly careful what you put on it. Throws off waste. What an incredible organ is the skin. But let's go to the head and you'll see 7 holes in the head. 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears and a mouth. And if we have a look at all those orifices, there are some amazing systems in them to protect. Let's start with the ear. With the ear, you've got your eardrum, and your eardrum protects the ear from any foreign object going in. But you've also got little hairs, and you've got a little bit of wax that can also trap. So there's a wonderful line of defense in the ear. There are no earbuds in my home. What do you call them? Tips? Q-tips? There are no 2 Q-tips in my home because they should never, ever go in the ear. So how do you clear your ears out? When the shower's coming hard and fast, let it sprinkle into your ear. That's an easy way to do it. For some people whose ears seem to block up quite quickly, they can put some hydrogen peroxide in their ear and it bubbles it all up, or hot coconut, but never put anything in there. There was one little boy, he was watching his parents clean their ears out, clean his out. So he's walking around one day with 2 sticking out of his ears, one out of this ear, one out of that ear. And his bigger brother came along and went, when that man attended our program, that happened when he was 5, he's now 40 and he's deaf. If there's an earache and the ear makes a hole in the eardrum to let the pus out, that's not a problem, because if the body makes the hole, the body can heal it up again. So that story alone is enough to get all those Q-tips out of the home, am I right? Because do you know, it's not so much what you say, it's what you do that little children do, isn't that true? Absolutely. So now let's go to the eyes. Amazing structure in the eye. If something were to come along and hit, we've got this bony structure here that protects the eye. Now, we've also got something else, and that's the eyelashes and blinking. That protects the eye. But if something happens to get in, like a bug, then the eye is surrounded with this mucus that the bug won't survive because it'll drown in the mucus. And if you go round and round the world with your eye, it'll move whatever went in there to the corner of the eye and you can flick it out. So there's a protection, quite a few protections there in the eye. What about the nose? The nose has little hairs in it. And the nose has it's like little caves in it, all these little caves. And if you breathe in air that has some dust on it, it's heavy. And so what it'll do, it'll ricochet around all the little caves until that dust falls off and lightens the air, and it'll go down into your trachea. Because you know we have two tubes coming down there. One's the trachea and one's the esophagus. Esophagus goes into the stomach and the trachea goes into your lungs. And even if something still gets in, there's little hairs. There's little hairs and you'll cough it up. So there's an amazing system in your lungs. But what I want to look at is the mouth. Now remember, mouth is for speaking, mouth is for singing, mouth is for eating, mouth is for drinking, nose and nose alone is for breathing. But let's come back to the mouth. Let's say that someone eats something that has bacteria in it. Maybe someone's making you a sandwich and you didn't realize they just patted the dog and then they start making sandwiches. And you can't see these microorganisms. And you eat the sandwich, not even knowing that it's got some bacteria there. Well, then it comes down into the stomach, and there's another line of immune defense there called the hydrochloric acid. The hydrochloric acid is very strong, and if one drop were to go on your hand, it would burn a hole in your hand. But God, in his wisdom and mercy, put a thick mucosa lining on the stomach, and that thick mucosa lining is 99% water. So a glass of water half an hour before the meal, one of the first things it does is it just thickens that mucosa lining. It's a line of defense. So your lining of your stomach basically looks like this. It's got big folds. And we're going to go on a journey through our gastrointestinal tract. I think that is the first lecture tomorrow night. And we'll be looking at this in detail. It's lined with gastric glands, and 2/3 of those gastric glands produce mucus. So there's a thick mucosal lining on the stomach. Now, from these little glands here is released a few enzymes, but the enzyme we're going to particularly look at is hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid is antimicrobial. And do you know what that means? Hydrochloric acid can kill bacteria, yeast, funguses that might be on the food. Dogs have 10 times the hydrochloric acid of humans. Have you seen what they eat? My daughter, she lives in Wisconsin and she's on 7 acres, and their dog pulled a leg from a dead cow into the yard. Whew, did we know it? You could smell it. And the dog's eating it. If we eat it, we die. The reason they don't die is they've got 10 times the hydrochloric acid that we humans have. So they can get away with it. I have never met anyone with too much hydrochloric acid. If someone says to me, I've got a very acid stomach, I say, fantastic, you must be digesting your food really well. And they look at me challenged. They used to say this a lot, too much acid, but you'll find they're saying it less and less because there's actually no such thing as too much hydrochloric acid. But many people have not enough hydrochloric acid. And it's important to have good hydrochloric acid because it's one of our front line of defenses. So how can we boost hydrochloric acid? But by the way, how does it get depleted? It gets depleted when people are eating every 2 hours. It gets depleted when people eat their biggest meal at the end of the day, and then poor old stomach has to keep working through the night when the rest of you's sleeping. It gets depleted when people are drinking large amounts of water with the meal, just totally dilutes it. Stress, anxiety with the meal can reduce hydrochloric acid. And many people today say, well, I get a tick for all of that. So when we go on our journey through our gastrointestinal tract, we'll certainly be looking at that. So how you can boost your hydrochloric acid is take the juice of a lemon just before a meal, 1/3 of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper in a little bit of water just before the meal. That'll wake anything up. Also, just even 1/3 of a cup of hot ginger tea just before the meal. That'll help to stimulate the release of hydrochloric acid. But It's our front line of defense once the food goes into the stomach. But let's say someone's got low hydrochloric acid because they're drinking with their meals, they're eating all day long, they're stressed all the time. Yeah, little by little, hydrochloric acid's getting low. We've got another line of defense. So lining our small intestine are little villi, and these little villi look like this. And the villi have a lacteal going up the middle, and the villi also have a blood capillary network going over them. But what I'm particularly talking about is a thick turf wall that covers the villi that's made up of Lactobacillus acidophilus and bifidobacterium. And this thick turf wall, which basically is not in our gut when we're in our mother's womb. When we were in our mother's womb, our gut was sterile, but when we're born, we're literally showered with our mother's microorganisms. Now, I was watching a documentary on the gut, and there was an obstetrician, and he was speaking, and he's easily late 70s. He said, "We always thought God made a mistake putting the birth canal and the anus so close." He said, to the point where 50 years ago, if a woman came in to have a baby, the first thing she was given was an enema to clear out the colon, because they don't want anything coming from that canal going anywhere near where the baby comes out. Notice what he said. We always thought God made a mistake. He said, we now know it's a perfect design. God never makes mistakes. We silly humans think we know a bit better. It's a perfect design. He said, we now realize that when the birth canal opens with that head coming down, the anus also opens and the air is coming out of there. The baby's face hits the air and it goes, and what's that first breath full of? Microorganisms from the mother's colon. Notice what the obstetrician said. We now know it's a perfect design. Also, in the first 3 days after the baby's born, the milk has not come into the breast. What is in the breast is a very thick, creamy, rich substance called colostrum. And that colostrum is a very important part of building the baby's immune system. If the mother's gut flora is compromised, she has a compromised gut flora to give to the baby. So it's very important that in pregnancy, the mother ensure that she's got good gut flora. Ideally, she does not take any antibiotics, which is effectively knocks off the good gut flora. In our gastrointestinal tract lined with this gut flora has 4 main roles. It's responsible for the final breakdown of some of the nutrients in our food. It's responsible for the absorption of our nutrients out of our gut and into the blood. But what I'm particularly looking at it now is the protection role. So let's say someone's got low hydrochloric acid and the bacteria escaped and got through the stomach. Well, God in his wisdom and mercies put another line of defense, and that's our gut flora. But if the person's been on antibiotics, in fact, one writer said taking an antibiotic is like dropping an atomic bomb in the gut. What did the atomic bomb kill? Good and bad alike. And it starts to kill off the good gut flora. The statin drugs, the cholesterol-lowering medication, that can kill off gut flora. Long-term painkillers can kill off gut flora. A high sugar diet feeds the yeast and knocks off the Lactobacillus acidophilus, the good the good bacteria. So can you see that there are many things that people are taking today that will knock back their line of defense? And when we go on our journey through the gut, we'll look at that in more detail. And that's why in many countries you'll find they have a form of cultured food as their traditional food. In Europe, you've got the sourdough bread, the cultured bread. You've also got sauerkraut. And in other countries, there might be yogurts. And in Asia, there's miso. These are all cultured foods. And in the culturing process, Lactobacillus acidophilus is created. So eating those foods helps to maintain good gut flora. But let's say the gut flora is not good, the hydrochloric acid is not good, and so now the bacteria gets into the blood where it should not be. We've got another line of defense, and this line of defense is probably what most people know as their immune system, which is the white blood cells. So let me introduce you to your white blood cells. We have 5 different types of white blood cells. We've got neutrophils, and neutrophils, they basically they're the highest amount. So about 60% of our white blood cells are neutrophils. And neutrophils is the main line of defense if something needs to be dealt with. So if someone gets a cut and it's got dirt in it and they don't clean it properly, and the next day it's all red and raised and you see the pus there, you know what the pus is? It's just dead neutrophils. And they're able to move out of the blood and into the tissues as needed. Another one is lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are a white blood cell that's produced in your lymph nodes. So the lymph nodes are part of the lymphatic system. So let me introduce you also to how the lymphocytes are made. Here's the colon, and you didn't think I was going to talk to you about the colon. So about here in the large colon are something called Peyer's patches. And Peyer's patches produce lymphocytes, and Peyer's patches are also use the gut flora to help in the production of the lymphocyte. That's why your gut flora plays a role in your lymphatic system. These Peyer patches are where the lymphatic system throws waste straight into the colon. We've got lymph nodes in our neck, in our armpits, in our groin, but you've also got the Peyer's patches in the colon, and they have found lymphocytes often in those Peyer patches. But there's another area that might surprise you too, and that is your tonsils. Your tonsils are the largest lymphatic organ in the body, and the tonsils throw waste straight out. So all through the body, we've got our lymphatic system, and our lymphatic system sweeps away waste from the tissues and then dumps the waste into the nodes in the neck, in the groin, in the armpit, and in the lymph nodes are lymphocytes, and they can deal with any pathogens that come in there. And then they dump the waste from that into the blood. And then there is another white blood cell that particularly is very good at cleaning up the waste, which is monocytes. So lymphocytes make up approximately 20% of the white bloods. Monocytes make up approximately 50% of the white blood cells. The neutrophils kill bacteria in a fascinating way. They surround it and they encapsulate it, and then they kill it with hydrogen peroxide. Did you know that? That's how your white bloods kill. And they basically die themselves in the process. Then the monocytes come along and clean up the waste, dump it into your bloodstream. Then it's coming out via your colon, via your urine, So there's some of the ways the waste gets out of the body. But I find the tonsils particularly interesting because your tonsils are the watchmen at the gate. And if they are swollen, what are they saying? Excuse me, something's wrong. What could be wrong? What could be wrong is maybe the person's breathing in moldy air. Maybe they're breathing in chemicals. But something that's causing the watchman at the gate to start yelling at you. Now, let's say in the old days, there's a city with a big stone wall around it, and there are watchmen on the gate. And the watchmen see enemy coming, and they start blowing the trumpet. What? Enemy coming. And the people are trying to sleep. So someone says, I'm going to fix this guy, and they come out and they shoot him. Now, everyone can go to sleep. Is that right? Taking the tonsils out because they keep swelling is like shooting the watchman at the gate. What should we be asking? Why? Why are they swelling? But probably one of the most common reasons is the food. And there are 5 common allergens that are the most responsible to causing the swelling of the tonsils. One is dairy. Now, if your father and grandfather and great-great-great-grandfather and great-great-great-grandfather is, say, if you're 6th generation dairy farmer, it's quite possible that you can handle dairy because it's in your genes and it's in your gut. But a lady said to me, I'm a 5th generation from the dairy, but she said my brother could never handle it. She said he'd get asthma, his tonsils would swell. So Mum and Dad brought a goat. And that brother had the goat's milk and he didn't react to the goat's milk. So why did this boy? Well, his mother wasn't 5th generation dairy. It was the father. So this boy got his mother's genes. That's why I believe that God meant each one of us to be our own doctor, because only we know how we feel, only we know what we've been through, only we know our generations, and it's not hard to explore the generations now. I have a girlfriend, her and her husband started an orphanage in Nakuru, Kenya, and they've been there for about 25 years now, and they started to get babies because a lot of orphans because of the AIDS. And the babies were thriving on the soy milk because they're vegetarians, but they got some Maasai babies, and the Maasai babies were not doing well on the soy. Because you know what Maasai eat? They eat blood, milk, blood, have for centuries. Now, the reason that they look fairly healthy is because they all walk about 100 kilometres a day. They're extremely healthy, and they aren't exposed to the poisons that a lot of us are. So my girlfriend's husband brought a cow, milked the cow, gave the goat's milk to the Maasai babies, and they thrived. See, it was in their genes. So genes has a lot to do with it. But many today, in fact, the current figures in Australia are 60% of people can't handle dairy. Now, if that was to be raw organic, yeah, I acknowledge that would bring it to about 30%. But I'm a 5th generation Scottish descent. I'm Australian, Scottish descent. I can't handle milk. As a little girl, we had to drink those bottle of milks at recess. Oh, I felt ill all day. I can't handle it. But many can't, and the reaction often comes through the form of asthma and the swollen tonsils. The other is the hybridized wheat of today. We'll look at this in another lecture, but the fact is, in the 1950s, wheat was hybridized. Dr. Norman Bourlague got a Nobel Prize in 1976 for his hybridized wheat. When I was a little girl, the wheat used to grow that high. You notice where it grows now? This high, with a thick stem, because it has such a heavy yield of grain, and that's why they put it through intensive crossbreeding to get a high yield of grain. But it was rushed through with no safety studies. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. Rushed through with no safety studies. Only now are they starting to see the problems that this hybridized wheat is causing. I've got a friend who's just retired. She's a doctor. Well, she retired about 2 years ago at the age of 78. She said, 40 years ago, you never heard of gluten intolerance. 20 years ago, you started to hear about it. Today, it's big. And it's got a lot to do with the hybridization of the wheat and how it changed the gluten or the protein structure. And when we look at diabetes, you'll see it changed the starch structure. So that's contributing to the diabetes. But many people have allergies to this. The most common symptoms are brain fog and bloating. And many people just live with that. They think it's normal. Well, I've got some good news. It's not normal. Oats, or you call it oatmeal, yeah? So what's wrong with oats? Well, they're high in lectins. And especially if the gut flora is not strong, the lectins get in and can increase inflammation. I've got 3 sons. I think their age is something like 38, 30, so something like that. They're all in their 30s. And they love oats. And they eat oats every morning. They're fit, they're strong, doesn't cause a problem. That's why I say you're the doctor. But if someone has inflammation, swollen tonsils, please leave the oatmeal out until we conquer it. Peanuts are commonly contaminated with mold. I know I'm down south here, is that right? And I know that a lot of people love their peanuts. Do you know, if you find someone that's growing peanuts, just harvested them, they'll be good peanuts. The problem is, in Australia, 75% of Australians live in the city. So the food's all grown in the country. And then it's all harvested and put in silos. And that's where the problem begins. You've got a cold, frosty morning, a hot, sunny day, and moisture is building up in the silos, and peanuts are particularly susceptible to mold growth. And the last one, which just is like kerosene to a fire on any problem, which is refined sugar. Now, what we find is if someone has tonsillitis, stop these foods, it may take at least 2 months to see the full response. Because you can have a slice of bread, it'll be out of your body in 24 hours, but the effect remains for sometimes up to 2 months when you've got a new crop of red and white blood cells coming along. So we find when someone has, especially to these two, allergies to these two, the last 2 white blood cells increase. So 3% of our white blood cells are basophils, and I think that's a Y, and no, it's an I, and eosinophils. So at Misty Mountain, trying to master the art of saying one thing and writing another. Eosinophils. Yep, there it is. Eosinophils. At Misty Mountain Health Retreat, when I used to work as the health director, the Australian government has seen fit to ban me. They claim I'm a threat to public safety. I'll let you make up your own mind on that one. But I used to do a live blood analysis on our guests. I take a prick of blood, put it on a cover slip, put it on the slide, and we could see it under the microscope and we could see it on the screen. And eosinophils and basophils, they light up like little bright lights in the blood, whereas the neutrophils and the lymphocytes, they're not quite as bright, neither monocytes. Called monocytes because it has one centre. Neutrophils have several centres. Lymphocytes, very faint, but these basophils, they're like little lights. And so in 1 drop of blood, someone should have about 2 eosinophils. Sometimes I'd look and they have 10 eosinophils. You see, when someone's got an allergy, you'll get an increase in the basophils and the eosinophils. And so I say to that person, do you eat wheat? I shouldn't. I always get bloated when I eat it. And I said, So they already know they don't handle it well, and I see it in their blood. So if I see 6 eosinophils, that tells me a gluten sensitivity, dairy sensitivity. If I see 12, that indicates an intolerance. If I see 22, 23 eosinophils in one drop of blood, that's celiac. That's extremely allergic. So I had a young couple in front of me, and they were both about 32. And I looked at the girl's blood, and she had about 23 eosinophils, and I said, aha. I said, this shows that you can't handle wheat and dairy. She said, absolutely right. If I eat wheat or dairy, I get diarrhea, I get rashes. I know I can't eat them, but I ate a bit on the plane. I said, yeah, I can see. It's in the blood. And then I looked at her husband's, and he also had about 21 eosinophils. I said, look at this. He said, oh, what a load of rubbish. He said, I don't have rashes and I don't have diarrhea. And his wife said, yeah, but you fall asleep in the restaurant. Brain fog and tiredness after the meal. How many people in offices are falling asleep in the office at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? That's very common when someone has an intolerance to wheat. So a 30-year-old young man shouldn't be falling asleep in the restaurant. So it's a common symptom. The good news is this young couple didn't think they could have children. So on seeing the blood, on hearing the lectures, they both changed their lifestyle. They discovered that there are some delicious breads that you can get almond milk, you can have millet porridge for breakfast or rice, you can have almond butter, and there's maple syrup honey. So there's great alternatives today. And the girl also saw she had a hormonal imbalance and changed that. 1 year later, I got a photo of their new baby. So cleaning up their life, getting rid of the allergens, balancing the hormones, this couple who thought they could not have children were able to have children. So you can see the far-reaching effects of this. But what I have found is if someone, or a child usually, is always getting tonsillitis, if they stop these allergen foods, the tonsils settle down and they can keep their tonsils. And we need our tonsils. They are the only organ of the lymphatic system that throws waste straight out. And I know on my morning walk, often when I'm running up hills, I'll cough up a lump. Now, that didn't come from my chest. You know where it came from? My tonsils. Because the lymphatic system sweeps away waste from the tissues. And I fly a lot to be able to do what I do. So it's not a surprise that every now and then there's a lump or two gets coughed up. I say, thank you, tonsils. You're doing a good job there of keeping my system keeping it running well and throwing off the waste. Oil pulling. Are you familiar with oil pulling? Put a spoonful of coconut oil in your mouth and swish, swish, swish. It's great for strengthening the gums and teeth, but it's also good for pulling waste out of the tonsils. So if someone has tonsillitis or sore throat or swollen tonsils, they can oil pull. But I'm warning you, we're not used to having a mouthful of oil, are we? And I know when I first started to do it, it was hard. And if you find it difficult, release it out, because the next time you do it, you'll get better at it. There's a pathway in my brain now that says it's all right, she's not going to swallow it. Just a spoonful. So at home, and I try and do this as often as I can, is just regular oil pulling. Such a simple thing, but that can also help to calm the tonsils down when they're a little bit inflamed. We're going to be looking at natural remedies this week, and if there are a few natural remedies that can be done to bring relief there. So when people talk about our immune system, I think most people are referring to our white blood cells. And you can see that an overload of the of the white blood cells isn't good, and not enough white blood cells isn't good. I know I was talking to one guy and he had cancer and he'd done chemotherapy. It just totally killed off all his white blood cells. How can we boost them? How can we boost our white blood cells? You're going into summer, and summer's a good time to get used to it if you're not quite brave at the moment. So what's next? When you have a hot shower, turn the hot tap off. Well, actually, I've discovered you don't have two taps, do you? In fact, the first night that I was staying with Sylvia, I didn't know how to put the tap on. So I had to get dressed again and go out and say, how do you turn the tap on for the shower? You pull it. Well, I did pull it, but not hard enough. And then you've got a dial, haven't you? Yeah, so it's hot's that side, I've discovered that, and cold's that side. So I had a shower and wash my hair this morning, and so I turned it all the way the other way. Your cold is cold. It's cold. And the good news is you can have a 10-minute hot shower and a 20-second cold. You don't have to have 20 seconds hot and 10 minutes cold. Isn't that good? But that quick cold is the best boost for your immune system. Our white blood cells and our red blood cells, did you know they're made in the bone marrow? That's where they're made. The exception is the lymphocytes, that some of those are made in the lymph nodes, under your arm, in your neck, and in your groin. So that is a powerful booster for the immune system. And so finishing every hot shower with a quick cold is one of your best preparations for the colds that come in the winter. And yes, summer's coming. It'll be a little bit easier. If you start in summer and just continue, by the time you come to winter, you'll be used to it. I'm just so used to it now. I started about 15 years ago running up and down hills at Misty Mountain and then diving in the creek. And I do that in the winter. I do it in the summer. And I started in the summer, when it got to the winter, I thought, I think I'll keep doing it. And I'm well dressed, so I get really hot. And I remember there was ice under my feet. So the ground got a frost on it. And I remember assessing what's the hardest part. Do you know the thought? It really is the hardest part, because when you dive into the creek, there's a little bit of but don't worry about that. It's just we're warm-blooded creatures, so we don't like the cold. But there's just the initial, and then you swim around a little bit and get out dry, and you just think, well, what's the hardest part? It's your mind. That is the hardest part. There'll be a little bit of but we're warm-blooded creatures, so we will react to that cold. But that reaction is the body saying, quick, move, because we're warm-blooded creatures. And if we were to lie in that freezing cold pond all day, we'd probably die from hypothermia. So the body knows that we must keep warm. But a quick cold has actually a warming effect. And I was in New Zealand when this happened. A lady came to see me about a certain subject, and she had a little 7-year-old boy with her, and his finger was twice the size. And I said, what happened to the finger? She said, oh, he's got cellulitis. Well, we could see that. What's cellulitis? Inflammation of the cell. It was red, raised with a white top. It was sealed. What's the white top? It's actually his neutrophils. I said, what happened? She said he was playing with his little matchbox cars in the dirt, and he had a blister. The blister broke. Well, he's lost his defense. The blister's broken. Kids, they don't even think about it, do they? And so, of course, the dirt got in. And immediately then, there's signals happening all through the body. The lymphocytes are the scouts. They're saying, neutrophils, quick, finger, go. And so that redness and that white pus is all the body dealing with it. Often in an injury, the blood tends to sit and pool, and it just needs our help. I said, what have you been doing? She said, he's on his second course of antibiotics and he's having painkillers and sleeping tablets to sleep at 97. I said, can I try something? She said, please. So I got 2 cups or 2 mugs, and in one mug I put hot water. And I made sure that he was comfortable with the temperature. It wasn't real hot to begin with because his finger's a bit sore. That's okay. And I kept it in there for 3 minutes because the first 3 minutes stimulates and then it starts to slow down. So then we go over to the cold. And ideally, you put a few ice cubes in. And there's a stimulating effect there because there's a reaction effect. But after 30 seconds, it starts to slow down. What's slowing down? The blood. You want to stimulate blood into the area. So after 30 seconds, back into the hot. But while it's in the cold, we put a little bit of boiling water in there to bring the heat up a bit. Did this 3 times. By the end of this, and we'll pursue that, the reason why it's so effective in another lecture. By the end of the 3, what's the time frame there? Talking about 11 minutes. By the end of doing this little boy had a big smile on his face. What does that mean? I would say by just reading his body language that he had a 50% easy pain reduction in 11 minutes. Incredible. How long does Tylenol take to have an effect? Half an hour? It's powerful. Then we grated a potato. We'll look at this in natural remedies and put that on. When he got home, his mother said, can we do that again? Why did he say that? Because of, I'd say it's starting to build up again. We did it at 11. They did it at 2. They did it at 6. He had a fresh potato on all night, woke up in the morning, the finger was right back to normal size. Every time they changed it, it was coming down a bit more and all the waste came out. He had the best night's sleep he'd had since this had happened. That's 10 days. How simple is that? But not only that, I'm mentioning it now because this alternating hot and cold boosts the white blood cell, boosts the bone marrow to make more white blood cells. No wonder the Bible says in Leviticus 17:11 that the life of the flesh is in the blood. We just need more blood into the area. Blood carries oxygen, nutrition, water, carries away waste, and brings with it the white blood cells. Such a simple thing. No need for antibiotics, no need for painkillers, no need for sleeping tablets. And how do they work on a little 7-year-old kidneys that's still developing? Such a powerful form of treatment, and yet so simple. Every home has water. Once again, I remind you of one of the first things I said. Everything we need, we have. We just need to know how to access it. Our immune system is powerful, but our immune system needs us to give it the right condition. We need to be drinking adequate water. We need to be eating nourishing food. We need to be not taking anything into our bodies that will knock off our white blood cells. We need to be finishing every hot shower with a quick cold. I'll be kind, start with 5 seconds, build up to 7, then 10, then 20. Maybe by the middle of summer, you'll be up to a even 20 or 30-second cold shower. Amazing boost to your immune system. One lady said, Barbara, you say we should listen to our body, and my body says don't have a cold shower after the hot. I said, but how do you feel after the cold? She said, like I've just had an injection of power. And that is absolutely true. It has a powerful effect. So I was in Peru 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, and we went up to a waterfall. We're right up in the Andes, and this water's coming off the glaciers. And we were so hot by the time we got up, and I said, to my guide, I said, I'm going to jump in. Is it okay? And it was freezing. But you're quick. And then you quickly get your warm alpaca clothes on. And as I'm walking down, I said to him, it feels like I've had an injection of power. It has such an incredible effect. So the next day, they brought more of the students up because I was at a retreat. And I think they all came up. And I dived in first, then they all dived in. There was one area where we could get in and the water was coming down. And they all experienced it. I think they only did it because I did it. And they noticed that I survived the experience. But it's such a powerful thing that people are even buying ice chests, sealing them, filling them with cold water, even ice cubes, and then training themselves to do 20-second, 30-second, up to a minute. But the effect on the body is powerful. So I think it's time for a break. It's 5:20, and I think that's when we're having a break for soup, and we'll come back for our next lecture after tea, or you call it supper.